kids have to learn how to solve problems and have good thinking skills, and STEM is the way to do that. And we all know hands-on learning really engages students. And so by utilizing STEM and integrating that within your content, you're going to have a lot more engagement, and you're going to have those kids just really get a deeper understanding.
All right. Thank you for taking on what was a pretty big question to start with. And I love exactly what you said. And I'll see if David or Denise has anything to add on to that about why STEM. Why do all educators need to bring STEM into the classroom?
I can add in. It's all encompassing. You're always trying to connect those real world activities. You want students to be grounded in their purpose and what they're learning. You want to connect science. You want to connect technology and engineering and mathematics. There's so many different ways that you can do that. Students. A lot of our students have cell phones. And why not? Use those cell phones for research. Why not use them for citizen science projects? So they can learn more about the natural world around them. Everything that we do, you want to encompass the activities, and you want to build on that research component to give students a better idea of the how and the why.
All right. Thank you, David and Denise.
Sure. These skills that we're teaching in the classroom can be applied to real world situations. They're becoming better speakers, being able to present their knowledge and what they're gaining from their research. They're able to utilize technology and learn how to use technology in ways to solve problems. So a lot of the applications that we do can apply to some facet of their life, even if they're not a science major or a STEM major. There's some aspect of STEM that they're going to carry with them, and they're going to move forward with, and be better for going out in careers and pushing our students forward.
Yeah, well, those are three great answers to what was a big first question. And I know for myself as a Spanish teacher, and I'm also a STEAM teacher for eighth graders, but I wasn't always a STEAM teacher. I was just teaching Spanish for a while. I won't say how many years, but in the last probably 5 years, I've been teaching a STEAM course. And that came to be because my school got a grant to change the library into a makerspace. And with me teaching at the time French and Spanish dealing with the arts, it was suggested that I would teach hummingbird robots, which I love telling the story because when I was asked that by my principal, I couldn't imagine what I was going to teach hummingbirds to do because my perception of a hummingbird was what you see outside. I had no idea of the programming for coding with robotics or anything with the hummingbird robots. So I learned pretty fast. Unfortunately, being here in Pittsburgh with Bird Brain Technologies, that was like my first kind of in with anything STEAM related. But even still, I didn't think that I could bring it into my Spanish language classroom. And over the last couple of years, I've been definitely trying to do that because I can see how many resources and opportunities are out there for us to kind of bring activities in. It's not something extra to go on top of everything else that we're already doing, which we know that that's a lot, but it is something that we can all bring in. And there are some really easy ways to go about doing that, but not everybody necessarily knows where to get started. So I'm hoping that with our panelists here today, that you can share some ideas, some things that you've done, especially now where we're all working in different learning environments, whether back in person with distancing or back in person with everything's normal, hybrid, virtual, you name it. So first, I guess I'll ask if somebody says, I can't do anything with STEM in my classroom, what is something that you might tell them, or how could you help to kind of get them started? And again, I'll leave whoever wants to take that one. I'm not going to call on anybody. I'm not going to spin a wheel, even though I could.
I guess I'll go. I actually had this conversation when I was working in my last position. I had some teachers that wanted to start integrating STEM, but they didn't know where to start. So we just sat down and looked at their curriculum and just looked at where we could just very easily integrate utilizing STEM, where we're not adding on, just like you said, we're not putting something on top of it, but we could do something in lieu of what they'd always done, like a paper and pencil activity. We created an engineering design. So for example, I worked with the ELA teachers, and they were reading Call of the Wild. And so we'd already been bringing in the dog sled dogs into our school for the kids to see them and learn how the dogs actually worked in the race in the Iditarod. But then I took it a step further, and we introduced an engineering concept where they had to design their own dog sled, and we used the Sphero robots. And so those became the dogs, and they had to create a sled that could pull through a course that I made in my room for the kids to use. So we introduced the engineering design process into the ELA class, but it tied in directly with their content that they were doing. And so it was a fun activity, but it really engaged them because they could see how they're utilizing all these skills, and it made sense. It was a good fit. We didn't force that connection. And I think that's the big key too, is don't force something to stick it in there just because you need to. Try to find a natural fit. And so that sometimes just takes a discussion, I think. And that's part of the initial thing.
I love that. And one of the things that I love too is my work in my STEAM class has evolved over the last couple of years is like, for me, for a lot of teachers too, I think it comes down to that comfort of not knowing or worrying, like, I'm not going to have all the answers. And when I started with those hummingbirds, I didn't. And students would ask me questions and I would say, there's a really good answer for that. And I would hope that a student would figure it out first so that then I could learn from them. But I also loved seeing their own interest build from it, not because I knew all about it and I wanted to tell them like, this is what you should do and this is how it should work, but it just kind of evolved in their own way, and it was more authentic and meaningful for them. And that does truly make a big difference. And for them to have, building all those skills, like the problem solving, the creativity, and the critical thinking, and of course, collaboration. So thank you for sharing that. That one was awesome. And David or Denise?
Oh, yeah, I can kind of add to the hummingbird projects. Those were some fantastic projects that we did in our makerspace. We were able to introduce new aspects of computer science with those projects. Lots of vocabulary-rich terms that we're able to kind of look across the curriculum and reinforce that knowledge across the curriculum. I love the T. I love the technology, and our students love that technology. And if we can, introduce it in ways that, in positive ways, and, show them that technology can be used to advance their learning, I think they take more ownership of that. So, big advocate of the T in STEM.
Yeah, and I'll ask you, because in case anybody doesn't know, what does STEM actually stand for? We've heard STEM and STEAM, STREAM, there are a lot, but in STEM, what is the T, or what are all of the letters in STEM?
I think it's, if I can remember correctly, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, if I can remember correctly.
Yeah, and so you are big on the technology, right?
Yes.
Yeah, me as well. Thank you. And Denise?
Sure. I think a STEM classroom, or, when people see you teaching in STEM, you're like in the hallway, you're outside, your classroom is very active and very sort of, I guess in sort of sense of the word, chaotic. I mean, even when you were, sure, Rochelle, when you're doing the robots, the hummingbirds, you're cutting out cardboard, and you're working with servo motors, and you're programming. So what ends up happening is teachers start seeing you're moving about, or they'll see you in the hallway and they'll see kids up and they'll start asking questions like, what are you doing? That's usually what ends up happening. And then that starts a conversation with other teachers. Hey, this is what we're doing. And they really see kids engaged and really having a good time. And there are days, there are hard days with teaching. There are those days that you're like, really? But there are so many days that are wonderful, that your students are totally engaged, that being at work is fun. And you really enjoy being with the kids and watching them create and have a good time and fun. And STEM, I think, is all those things. So when people see that hustle and bustle in your classroom, or hear about it, or teachers passing by on their planning because they're not teaching during that time, that's where those conversations happen, and hopefully you inspire other teachers to sort of take on that chaos a little bit, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah.
The risk thing too, I think, is the big part, is making sure they know it's okay to take that risk, because it does get chaotic and it does get loud. And I think some people get nervous that they're losing control, but they're actually not.
Yeah, that is. It is a scary thing when you have, and then an administrator comes in and you're worried, like, oh, what are they thinking? You're thinking everyone's talking, people are walking across, and I'm like, you have to stay in your area, because we have scissors or whatever's out, you're trying to establish those rules. So, and there's always that person that comes walking in. You're like, okay, well, we're real. This is what's happening. So,
I love the words chaos and risk. And neither of those were things that I would have accepted or taken on years ago, because you're right. I mean, I wanted everybody has to stay in their seat. And why are you standing? And don't lean on the desk. We're not using any other materials. Everything has to be in order. And with STEM, a lot of time people think you need a lot of materials, or it has to be really planned out, or it is going to be messy. And that's absolutely correct. And I was going to ask the question, what does a classroom look like with STEM curriculum, or what does a STEM, what does a makerspace look like? What are things that you think are musts, or I mean, does it require a lot of money and investment and time, or are there simple things that we can do, especially now, if we're not in the classroom, or students don't have access to a lot of devices or whatever the resources are? Anything that you can suggest for people to just start learning about STEM really quickly?
I could answer that question. When I first took on a STEM position, I left full-time online teaching, so I went into a school that actually split. So that because it was overcrowded, so they built another school. Well, they weren't supposed to have a STEM teacher, and all of a sudden they added that position, and I ended up receiving it. So I walked into this room and there was a closet and there was nothing in it. And it brought a level of anxiety to me that was tremendous, because I kept thinking a STEM classroom has all these robots, and we have, all these Arduino kits, and we have all this technology, and I have a closet with nothing in it. So that was very stressful. Caused a lot of anxiety for me, for sure. But then I just sort of relied upon, like, one of the very first things I did was MIT App Inventor. Okay, we had Chromebooks, so we created mobile apps because I didn't have anything, like nothing. And so I started going the technology route. And and then we did paper challenges. And I went out and we got some PVC pipe donated, and we made catapults, which was so much fun. And you just have to think outside of the box. So you can start with absolutely nothing, or you can, start getting that technology and getting those grants and things like that. Obviously, I'm about 4 years in now, probably about $30,000 in grants. So my classroom is equipped, or I have the classroom now. I got called, I just got called yesterday, make sure you're locking up robots, because there's some of them are sitting out on your, bookshelves. And, we do have a hybrid going and online environment going. So, but yeah, so it could be anything from real to no supplies to, making that great maker space. It's just, as a teacher, it's just that I think the longer you're in STEM, the more you acquire, obviously, and the longer you're teaching, the closet starts to fill. I'm sure you all know that as well. Even with your robots, Rochelle, with the hummingbirds and stuff, it keeps adding on, right?
Yeah,
So
well,
it can be done, right?
it can. And with those robots and the hummingbirds, I will say that the first year I really wasn't that great at it. I got better, but I was fortunate that Bambi from Bird Brain actually came to my school a couple days to work with my students, and then they got really good at creating, and so I just kind of let them go. But in the second year, when I was all ready to go and I was confident that I could take it on better than the first year, they moved it to the 7th grade, so I had to come up with a new course to teach, and so I had to move on. But that's when I started to teach the emerging technologies, where now, of course, I love that because of all the augmented virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and still do a lot with the STEAM and coding and robots and all of that. I just don't have the horrible hummingbird robot that I made on my own from years ago. Actually, I think I do, because there was a training in Pittsburgh at Asset STEM, and they gave you different materials to pick. And there was actually a Pirates bobbleheads box. And I just had in my mind, I could make an awesome bird. I grabbed feathers, I grabbed the pipe cleaner, I programmed it to talk, and it was an absolute mess. But I showed my students and they laughed at me for a long time at what it looked like. but I said, it's about the process, right? I had fun. This is what I learned. This is what I can do. And I said, now it's up to you, whatever you create. And the things that they created that year were unbelievable. I still have pictures. I mean, that's been probably 5 years ago now, but it was amazing to learn from them. And so a good experience. So thank you for sharing that. Debbie or David?
Yeah, I mean, I agree exactly with what Denise said. A lot of times you start out with little to none and then just looking for your resources. I think a lot of it is to think about what your end game is like, are you looking to make it a makerspace? Are you looking to do more technology? And then you make your focus go that way. The Civil Air Patrol, you can join that as an educator member and you can get some great resources to use in your classroom. They give out free kits of different tech tools, devices. I mean, I got my first set of Spiros for my class through Civil Air Patrol. So, you can start looking for some of these different organizations that will help support you. Lean on your parents or, do a donors choose kind of thing where you can try to get some things that way. But like, if you're going to be doing a lot of paper and makerspace kind of things, ask the parents to donate, save your bottles, your water bottles and your paper towel rolls and things like that, where you really can start outfitting with those basic supplies through donations. And then you can do like Denise did, and I know David's done a lot too, getting grants to get some of those bigger items that you want to put in your space. Yeah, so that's kind of how I did things at my school when I was getting stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you. And you're right. There are so many opportunities out there. It's just figuring out where to begin or where the grants are and what's available, but also thinking about your classroom and what might work best for you and for your students, but being connected too. So like learning from other educators, like learning from all of you here, and then just seeing locally here, like with Debbie and I in Pittsburgh, there are a lot of places that kind of loan out different items and have a lot of resources available. So just kind of connecting with local organizations to find out what's available. Also a good idea if you can find things, especially if they are for free, to at least try them out and see how it goes with your students. Thank you.
Yeah,
David?
and then
Oh,
just
sorry.
one more thing really quick to pick on what you just said, being connected. So like Twitter is such a huge PLN for everybody, but that's also where we all learn about new ideas and new technologies and new grants and new materials and things like that. So I always tell everybody you need to get into Twitter and start following people, because that's another way to learn about how to enhance what you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. David?
Hey, just going to piggyback on some good points. In our makerspace, we were very fortunate to be grant funded. So, look at your grant resources. You've got GetEd funding. Look at your professional organizations. There are always some amazing, sources of information and great ways to share project ideas and learn from each other. So, don't underestimate the power of a grant. You've got community grants. You've got, Society for Science grants, state and local grants. They're there for you to obviously utilize it in your classroom, and you want your students to benefit and you want to maximize the learning. So, definitely make sure you're checking out all the grant sources available to you.
Yeah, good advice. I know there was just even in Pittsburgh with Remake Learning, which everybody has heard of Remake Learning and the work that they do. There are a lot of opportunities that come through that. And I know I get emails weekly with upcoming events and opportunities for educators to connect with. And also going to give a shout out to JC Maslick, who does a lot of work also from Pittsburgh and has some great books out there too with a lot of ideas that she's been sharing, especially even lately. I think just asking some questions and kind of sharing. Like people have been putting the hashtag STEM, STEM ed, STEM education, looking for ideas for things to do at home where you don't have a lot of resources or materials. And I can think back to earlier this year when we were actually traveling and going to conferences. Debbie and I were at our conference here in Pittsburgh, and we were on a team together doing some different challenges. And we had, goodness, I can't remember exactly what it was, but we had different materials. We had I think we could use tape and maybe some paper towel rolls, and what else was there? But we had to build something that would hold a Primanti's sandwich.
Straws. I think we had straws.
Oh yeah, it was
course.
straws. And I had done that, I think 2 years ago. Same thing, was my first experience doing a STEM challenge. And I honestly almost rolled my eyes at it, if I could say that, because I thought, how am I going to even do this? Like there were so many things like with string and all of these things, but it was so, and cups and just changing all of it, but it was so much fun. And I got past the like, oh, this is just STEM, but all of the skills that were happening in the collaboration and trying to be creative and the fun, of course. And I noticed that as we worked through all of it, like not, I want to say my buy-in, but kind of like my buy-in was, I was all in. I loved the experience. And at the end, people had the different pictures and I was smiling and happy because, you know, the candid shots. And I just thought, this is what I need to bring in for my students. So I bought some cups and some pipe cleaners and some straws, and we had some fun with that. So thank you for sharing those ideas. And I did want to ask another question that usually comes up in a lot of these areas is, how do you assess? Like, what do you do for assessment if you're bringing in some of these different types of activities for STEM education? Or I know even with like project-based learning, if you tie that in with it, a lot of times people say, well, how do you assess students? Any ideas or any of your experiences that you want to share?
I mean, I use rubrics a lot with some of especially the engineering design process when we're doing challenges. Those seem to be a really great tool to use because the students know what I'm looking to see. Even though they're being creative, I have a creativity part put in there, but it's also, I still want them to go through the steps and the process, and so I want to look at that. So I do use a lot of the rubrics, and then just sometimes it's just question and answer. Like let's just talk about it. How did you do as a group? What could you have done better? What did you learn? What was a challenge for you? So sometimes it's just a self-assessment and a small group discussion as well.
Thank you. Debbie, Debbie, go again. Denise or David. So rubrics are good. And there's, again, I'm sure there's a lot of resources out there as well. And I like, for years, I thought I had to have a tangible assessment, but also just having conversations, asking the kids, like, what are you noticing? What are you learning? What are you taking away? What are your next steps? How could you improve? Just throwing a couple of those things out there. Again, not things that I knew a long time ago, but things that I have learned over the last couple of years. David?
Yeah, I was going to say, pushing the T for technology again, keep it interactive. You can use Flipgrid. You can keep it interactive with Kahoots. Students, they want it to be interactive. They want to share that assessment. They want to say what works and what doesn't work. They want to have an active hand in the learning process. They want to, be able to add to that body of information and say, hey, this is what I learned from it. This is how we can improve it, for the next group of students that might want to do the project. This is how we can, add an interactive component into, not only keep our attention, but, pique our interest and, make it fun at the same time.
Yeah, great points. Thank you, David. And I love the push on technology too, especially now. A couple of things, like you mentioned, Flipgrid, also Kahoot, and there's a tool that I learned about probably 2 months ago now, but it's called Zigazoo, and there are daily challenges. It's kind of I don't know, a mashup between, say, Instagram and TikTok, where teachers can have their classroom, and there are a lot of different educator channels that are affiliated with it now. So I can share those with everybody, but they keep adding new ones. And if you go, you could create your own prompt, a short video, put a picture, do a challenge, for example, for students, and they record. It's a 30-second video. So students that are in the same class can then kind of scroll through and see each other's videos. And I've seen students in pre-K, elementary through middle school, and I know my friend Laura Steinbrink has been using it with her Spanish 1 and 2 classes and their students. She said they absolutely love it. So the idea is you can also use that for students in the hybrid distance, whatever learning experience we're in, to do a STEM challenge and share, what it is. Or there's a daily kind of prompt from some of these different educator challenges. So I encourage everybody to check out Zigazoo for sure. All right.
Is it spelled just like it sounds?
Yeah, I'll type it in. It is. Yep, it is. There it is. Thank you, Kathy Sue. And I will go to Denise, and then Kathleen, I would love for you to share that. I'll ask Denise if she has anything to add about the assessment, and then if you want to share with us what you had mentioned here in the chat.
Sure. I do think that sharing piece is really important. And I think when students know that it's going to be shared, that they're going to have to present it either at a community fair, or they're going to have to present it for a school project, or in a Flipgrid. When you give the students the floor, I think the level of work and the level that they're putting into it sort of increases. I think sharing is very important because, why are we doing this? So we've got to share it with an audience. And I believe that my students produce better work when they know that that is one of the stakes, or one of the expectations in the rubric, is to share out their work and talk about their process of making, and how each of them collaborated and came up with that final product, and how it's going to solve a specific solution. It's whatever we do make, it's got to solve a problem. So those are all key aspects, and providing that choice. Obviously, you have to provide choice in STEM. I mean, everyone's got a different idea. Everyone's has a different level of creativity. So the sharing out, I think, is extremely important. And we've got so many tools now. And this one I have to check out. You're talking about the new one. It sounds a little bit like Flipgrid. But in this environment, though, that's exactly what we need, is those types of tools. And then, obviously, when we're face to face, we have the classroom and things like that. So I want to check that site out that you're talking about, though.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Like, I was just looking through and scrolling through just to see, even if you check them out on Twitter and look at the Zigazoo, you'll see some of my tweets. I've been sharing out some of the videos and some of the ideas for teachers, because we're all looking for ideas, and not everybody has a lot of time to invest in exploring a lot of the options out there. So if you can gather a few just to check out, especially if they can be used for all different levels and require just a quick download, and if they're free, then they're even better, because funding right now is tight. And so finding these options that little or no cost, and definitely that can be easily used by a lot of teachers, students, and even families as well, are really important. And so I did want to go back to the chat in 1 minute to Kathleen to join us, but also want to mention back to Zigazoo, you can join with the premium. There's an account for teachers. So you have your dashboard, and so you have your students and they join in, and it is free for teachers for this school year. So definitely check that out, share with your friends. And Kathleen, if you would like to, I can ask you to unmute, because I would love to hear about what you mentioned here in the chat, if you would like to share with us with the Invention Convention.
Yeah, sure. I'm a big advocate for invention education in the classroom, and it's something that takes your kids a step beyond just the makerspace. I think that competition is a kind of a cornerstone of a lot of STEM education programs in one way or another, and a lot of the programs that we do are kind of like, we do the science fair, and we do Science Bowl and things like that. And those are great, but they're not what our kids need going forward. So I think that invention and entrepreneurship is the piece that we need to add on top of what we're already doing with STEM. We're not just teaching them math and science and following directions and applying rules and formulas and all of that. We're also teaching them how to solve an undefined problem, how to generate alternative solutions, how to fail and fail and fail again and keep going, because they're going to find their success at some point. It also helps them to learn how to pitch and how to be an advocate for their product or their idea. And those are things that I don't think we teach very well in schools, because entrepreneurship isn't really something that we think about as a skill that kids need. But honestly, with the way the jobs that are the newer jobs are, our students are going to have to kind of make their own way. There's no finding a job at 25 and working there for 50 years anymore. It just doesn't happen. Our kids are going to have to be able to be flexible and adapt to whatever the working conditions are for them in the future. And I think that entrepreneurship helps them to see that they can survive even if things aren't very certain. They have the ability to sell their ideas. And so I put a bunch of links in there, and I hope you don't mind that I did that. Invention Convention. I'm from Georgia, so in Georgia we have the our invention convention for the state level is called Inventure Prize, and I worked with a team this summer. We have digitized all of our lesson plans, so everything is there. It's like plug and play for teachers. We try to make it as simple as we could. So that is all free online. So I put that. I also put a copy of the logbook I used with my students. That's a digital version of it. And I've presented on this topic like many times because, like I said, I'm very passionate about this topic. And so I put a slideshow as well from one of my presentations. So you can just kind of look through that. And if anybody has any questions about it, I'd be glad to talk to them anytime. I'm one of my goals for this year as a Einstein Fellow is to try to bring invention and entrepreneurship education into the state where I'm working, which it happens to be Nevada. So we'll see how that works, but that's one of my goals. So again, I'm something I care a lot about, and I wish every student were doing this. So thank you for letting me jump in there.
Absolutely. That I felt like I was just constantly nodding my head with everything that you were saying, because especially with preparing for the future and looking at like the entrepreneurial skills. And a couple of years ago, I think probably it could be 2, it could be 3 at this point, because you never know with time, it passes so quickly. But I started to do some research into like the gig economy was something that I first heard about and I didn't know anything about, and figured out pretty quickly it's, you know, short-term jobs and helping students to become prepared for being flexible in the future, for not having, like you said, like starting a job at 25 and are they going to have that same job for 50 years. And then also doing some research looking at the job outlook for, I think at the time it was for like 2022 from the World Economic Forum, looking at the different skills, critical thinking, collaboration, problem solving, creativity, you name it. And all the time thinking, okay, STEM and STEAM are areas that we can do that. And I know probably a few months ago, I was continuing to do some research, and I've said this to my students because they're asking, well, why do we have to learn this? And what's this going to mean for the rest of my life? And I said, well, they're estimating that they're going to need almost 4 million jobs in STEM in the next 5 years. And who's going to fill those jobs? Like, we need to provide opportunities. Not that you're necessarily going to absolutely love everything that you do in that STEM classroom or wherever you're doing those activities, but the idea is to just give them an opportunity to see if they like it or not. And I always joke and say, do you really think that when I was your age in high school, when I was taking French, that I thought that I would be a Spanish teacher or a STEAM teacher? Like, it's about opportunities and about figuring out where your passions are, what your skills are, what your interests are, and being flexible, like you said, for the future. So I definitely appreciate you joining and sharing all that you did. I'll make sure that that also gets shared into our session details for this event. So thanks, by all means. Anything else you want to share, we are happy to have it. Any of my guests want to add anything on to what Kathleen had said?
I would just love to say too about the entrepreneurship part, ties in exactly with what Denise was saying, that that they do need to be able to learn how to pitch their idea and explain why they did it and where they came up with the idea and why they used the materials that they did. And so, and even in conjunction with that invention convention or things like that, you know, Junior Achievement has that whole strand with entrepreneurship, and they work with schools, and that's one of their missions too, is having kids learn how to be creative and pivot and learn to be flexible, but to also be available in this industry and know how to present themselves and share. So that's something that, you know, they actually they have an entrepreneurship program as well. So there seems like there's a lot of other opportunities we can introduce and integrate into the STEM area as well with that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And just last couple of things here as we start to wind down or wind up, I don't know. But thinking of free, I know Microsoft offers a lot of different resources and materials for educators for all types of things, but also specifically for STEM. So if anybody's looking for something to check out, look into the STEM, like Minecraft, for example, or I think Make Code. They also have Hacking STEM. And even things like, I think Tinkercad a couple of weeks ago, Jamie Donnelly had done something online with augmented virtual reality, and she was talking about coding and 3D design. And so Tinkercad has an online web-based, now, not that I've used it much, but it's something that I definitely want to try in this year with my students, because like I said, I love learning right along with them, especially when I don't know the answers, then I can learn that much quicker from them. And any other last bits of information and advice has now become information. Advice or tips for anybody if they say, you know what, all right, you've convinced me, I'm going to start. What do I do first?
Collaborate. You gotta collaborate. You've got to reach out. You've got to get out of your comfort zone. You've got to be willing to try something new and something different. Might not work the first time, might not work the second time, but eventually you'll have a completed project.
Yep. Love
And,
that one.
Definitely utilize the resources. I was very shocked. Every year, my local grocery store, Publix, I write a grant, and every September, have to write the little, charity statement or like classroom statement, and they give me $250 every year since the last 4 years. Toshiba Innovation Grant. The first one, I got a bunch of veneer sensors, so we could do a bunch of, STEM in the classroom. And I thought, Toshiba, should I bother applying again? They already gave me $5,000. It's a year and a half later. Should I reapply again? Okay, I'll just reapply again. Get funded again, another $8,000. So you can tap into those resources. Community grants. I have a community foundation here called Waccamaw Community Foundation. I applied once, they gave me $2,000 a year and a half later, so you would be surprised if you have some really good projects, and they'll support them, and they'll support them again. So that was something that I tried, and it has worked out, and I've been very blessed and very fortunate. So definitely try grant writing. You will be surprised. I know, I first met David, he definitely started telling me about grant writing, and then just taken off from there. So definitely collaboration is really important.
Yeah, great advice. So collaboration, check out the grants. And I know, Denise, you've had great success with that. So it's inspiring for me to actually work on a grant the next couple of days. So fingers will be crossed. And Debbie, any last suggestions or
Just
advice?
exactly what all of you have said, and especially Rochelle and David, the collaboration thing and learning together. So I think if a teacher is willing to take that risk to try something new, but learn it alongside of his or her students, that takes out that discomfort because you're both learning it, but it also promotes that whole idea of we're learning together, we're collaborating together, and it just makes a different environment in your classroom. And I think it really encourages everybody to be learners together, which is what we all are. Ultimately, we're all learners.
Debbie, can you share about, you said something with your new position you wanted to talk about. I wanted to hear about that, something in Pittsburgh, and you're doing something with technology.
Yeah, so the Commonwealth Charter is opening a new facility called TechWorks, and we're just really tying in the tech careers with this school, and it's a virtual school, so it'll be a center where kids can come on site and work hands-on, and a lot of it's going to connect directly to industry. So we want to do some training and some micro credentialing and certifications, but we're going to be doing drones and virtual reality, artificial intelligence, esports. So I've been actually already talking to all of you guys or have you on my list to talk to as some resources. We're going to have this whole interactive room where the kids can go in and touch different things, and it's all interactive. But yeah, just a lot of different technologies that we're going to partner with in the industry. And so it's really exciting, and I can't wait to share it and take you guys on a virtual tour when it opens, hopefully next month. So it's going to be great. So, but I definitely will be reaching out to all of you because you guys have some great resources as well to help us with.
Yeah, sign me up. I want to I
Yeah.
want to join in everything that you said. I want to be part of that because that's
Okay,
all
gotcha.
areas that esports is one that I've been trying to learn more about.
Yeah, I just tagged David for that the other day. So
Yeah.
that's something that we want to do.
Sounds good. Well, thanks to everybody for joining in now, for everybody who's watching later, and for my guests for all that they have shared. and also the participants for sharing too. We will catch you next week, same time. And if you have ideas for topics to talk about on the show, let us know. And we would love to have you join us as our guests and panelists. Have a great rest of